Hello and welcome to the I Hit Drums, a Beginner's Guide podcast with me, Mark, your teacher for this series. In the last lesson, we started looking at open hi-hat exercises using the left foot. Today, we're going to continue with that by looking at the next two scenarios. So hopefully over the past week, you've had some time to get to grips with those first two scenarios, both of which involve hi-hat and bass drum alone. In the first scenario, we were bringing the feet down together when we closed that hi-hat, and in the second, the feet were going in opposite directions because the bass drum was coming down as the hi-hat was opening. We're going to begin today on page 65 by looking at exercise 10.3, closing the hi-hats with a snare drum. So from this point onwards, we're going to start including snare drums into these open hi-hat grooves. And in this scenario, whenever we're closing the hi-hat, we're going to be bringing down the hands together. So the left foot is going to be closing those hi-hats together as we hit the hi-hat cymbals and also as we hit the snare drum. So let's try the first example at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you might have found there that your muscle memory kicked in, and when it came to closing that open hi-hat, you might have actually added the bass drum. That's okay. A lot of drumming is about building up habits and then rewriting some of those habits. So let's try that first example again at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We're going to skip ahead now to the third example where we have two open hi-hats in the exercise. We also have two bass drum hits on beat 3 and the and of 3. And what we actually have here is that second scenario. We're going to be opening the hi-hat with the bass drum, so the feet are going to be moving in opposite directions, and then you're going to be closing the hi-hat as the hands come down together. So let's give this a try at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Skipping ahead again to the fifth example now, we have a slightly more complicated groove with an open hi-hat on beat 4, closing the hi-hats on the and of 4, this time with the snare drum also being on the and position. Let's try this one 2 times around. Again, 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now let's have a go at the sixth example in exercise 10.3. This one's very similar to the fifth example, only we've got an extra open hi-hat on the and of 1. Let's give this a try. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, and now we're on to the final example in 10.3, and I'll be honest, this one is pretty evil. A lot of my pupils struggle with this one at first, but when you get it, there's going to be a great sense of satisfaction. But there's 3 open hi-hats within this, and there's a whole heap of different scenarios. You've got opening the hi-hat with the bass drum, you've got closing the hi-hat with the bass drum, and you've also got closing the hi-hats with a snare drum. So there's a lot of coordination going on in this exercise. Let's give it a go once through at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so I did warn you, that one's very tricky. Let's try it again at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We're now going to move on to the final scenario within our open hi-hat chapter. This is exercise 10.4, opening the hi-hats with a snare drum. So in all these examples, whenever you open the hi-hat, you're actually going to be hitting the snare drum and the hi-hat at the same time. So similar to 10.2, things are moving in opposite directions. Only this time, the hands are going to be moving down as the left foot is moving up. Once again, this might challenge your balance a little bit. So we're going to take it slow. Let's try exercise 10.4, example 1 at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to skip ahead to the third example, where we have 2 snare drum hits, the second of which has the open hi-hat, and then we're going to be closing the hi-hat with a bass drum, similar to scenario 1. We then have another open hi-hat on beat 4. Let's try this, 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The fourth example is a little bit trickier than it looks. So we're going to be opening the hi-hat as we hit the snare drum and hi-hats on beat 2. We're going to be closing it with a bass drum on the end of 2, and this is then followed by a bass drum on its own. Now again, we've got a lot of different coordination going on here, so this might be a little bit tricky at first. Let's give it a try at 40 BPM. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Hopefully you didn't have too much trouble with the first half of that last exercise, because it appears again in the last example. Only the second half of the groove is slightly different. You'll also notice that we have an open hi-hat on the and of 4, which closes as we go back around to the beginning on beat 1. So let's try this last example 2 times around. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'd recommend you spend some time working on those next 2 scenarios as well as the previous 2 before you try the song Bang the Plank. The song itself probably has far too many open hi-hats in it. In a lot of pop music and rock music, you might not have this many open hi-hats within such a short song. But for the purpose of developing that technique, there's lots in there. This will not only test your coordination, but also your reading. So take it slow when you start this piece. A few things to point out about this song though before you give it a try. The intro is a 4-bar rest. What this means is that you'll hear the initial counting of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll need to count a further 4 bars before you start playing. On bars 6 and 7, we have what looks like a percentage symbol. This actually means repeat the previous bar. So when you first get to bar number 6, you're going to essentially repeat bar number 5. And then when you get to bar number 7, you're going to repeat bar number 6, which was bar number 5. Make sure you don't mistake this symbol for a rest. This is not a rest. In the section labelled V, which means verse, you have 4 bars, and at either end of these 4 bars you'll see repeat symbols. The thick line, thin line, double dot. So make sure that you play this first section 2 times through. In the pre-chorus, which starts on bar 13, you're playing mostly bass drums, but there is the odd snare drum and hi-hat hit that appears as well. And you'll notice that after these, there's a hi-hat foot symbol just below the bass drum, because you're not actually going to be hitting the hi-hat when you close it in this case. You're just going to close it with the bass drum, but not strike the hi-hats themselves. You will, however, hit the hi-hats when you open them. The section marked C2, which begins on bar 21, is the second chorus. The first 2 bars of this are played on the ride cymbal, although we're also starting with a crash hit. The remaining 2 bars are then on the hi-hats, which include open hi-hats. So you're going to be repeating this 4-bar section, half of it being on the ride cymbal, half of it being on the hi-hats. The section marked C3, or the third chorus, then gets very heavy on the open and closing of the hi-hats. So take your time with this section. You may even want to isolate this section and work through it separately. Finally, the outro is quite a similar pattern to what we had in bar 16. Good luck with this song. Like I say, it's a challenging one not only for the playing, but also for the reading. So go as slow as you need to. You could even set a metronome at a slower speed than 40 if you need to. If you would like some feedback on those last 2 scenarios, or on your progress with this song, you can get in touch with me by going to Instagram at @ihitdrums, or by going to Facebook at facebook.com/ihitdrumsuk. For a small fee, you can send me a video of your progress, and then I'll get back to you with some feedback and instruction in my own video. This offers a flexible approach to traditional lessons. You can, however, get in touch with me about online lessons, which we can have via Skype or Zoom, and these can happen anywhere in the world, providing that our time zones make sense for us both. Next time, we're going to look at quarter note grooves, and these might look easier than they actually are. But until then, enjoy! I Hit Drums, a beginner's guide, can be purchased as a paperback through Amazon, or as an ebook through Amazon, Apple Books, and Kobo. Just search for I Hit Drums, a beginner's guide.